I will be speaking on gender identity and the relationship with misogynistic exploitative practices against women in India. The rise of gender identity in India is eroding women's rights. But in addition to it, there is a rather sinister relationship between gender identity and some misogynistic practices against women. In my part, I would elaborate on how this is happening in India. So, first up, I'm going to talk about the fashion and beauty industries, which are built on the imposition of pain and inconvenience on women by way of clothing, depilation, and makeup. But to genderists, these practices are an important means of performing or expressing gender and gender identity. Alok Ved Menon, a performance artist, says, I was tired of seeing cisgender models being congratulated for transgressing gender on the runway, while gender non-conforming people continue to be punished for doing it on the street. So I decided to try my hand at designing my own clothes. I wanted to show the world that gender non-conformity, that trans femininity, that body hair is beautiful, that trans people can and should be at the forefront of this movement in fashion. Trans activists argue that trans identified people need more representation in the fashion and advertising industries. And it is the failure to do the same which makes fashion and beauty industries exclusive and non diverse. There are jewelry and fashion brands in India who, in the drive to be inclusive, are now advertising products which traditionally feminine products which with trans identified men as the center. Like, for example, this is an ad done by a jewelry brand called Bhima, featuring a trans identified man and his journey of transition leading up to the final day of his wedding, on which he is decked in jewelry and a typical Indian bridal costume. Women and girls in India know well that carrying all that metal onto oneself is tiring, and there is always the pressure of losing so much as a trinket. Bangles make it difficult for women to use their hands freely, and earrings can be worn only after going through a painful process of puncturing, which little girls are put through. But with gender identity, these markers of women's oppression are now being celebrated as part of a man's journey into becoming a woman. Similarly, in a bid to express their femininity and their gender, trans and non-binary identifying men also take to pornification, as shown in this picture. But what the gender cult celebration of fashion and porn culture completely ignores is the misogyny inherent in these industries. This is because fashion and beauty relied on the continued degradation of women and the female body. Uncomfortable garments like sari, gowns, dresses, heels, makeup including accessories like jewelry and bindi all involve women putting themselves through inconvenience and literal pain. The use of makeup products inflicts damage on women's skin. These practices are imposed on women under male supremacy to make the subordinate status of women clear. Women and girls in India and all over the world have to engage in one or more of these practices, like maintaining long hair, for example. Beauty and fashion exist to make women desirable and fuckable to men. Male supremacy dictates the masochism inherent in beauty practices so that women can so much as have a place in the society. Similarly, pornography objectifies women and serves the male sex right of sexual access to women. The making and consumption of pornography is already rampant in India, with the mainstream discourse defending it as free speech, whilst ignoring the harm done to women and girls. Now, added to that is gender identity and trans identifying men bolstering porn culture by claiming that the same is a means of self expression and individual identity, thus making the systemic oppression of beauty and porn on women and girls invisible and obscure. Men adopting these practices like fashion and beauty is not equalizing or revolutionary. It is an insulting parody of the tyranny imposed on women on a daily basis. A drag queen in India who goes by the stage name Rovina Tampon, with his real name being Rovin Sharma, says in an Indian magazine, we are fighting in our heels and gowns with our makeup on. Just accept it. Sadly, Indian women cannot say the same because of the pain caused to our feet by the heels and the gowns hindering our movement. Hundreds and thousands of women all across India, both rural and urban regions, toil in schools and offices as housekeepers and laborers in something as exhausting and uncomfortable as a sari. These women do not have the luxury to go to work wearing something comfortable, as they are likely to be killed should they transgress the norm. And girls as young as 17 have been killed by their families for wearing jeans in India. But with its excessive focus on performance and superficial depictions using mass media, the gender cult has completely ignored the fact that beauty and porn are not about liberation or fun in the first place, but the sadomasochism of men as the oppressors of women. What would truly be liberating is a systemic opposition to fashion, pornography, and beauty practices in India, which is not incoming from gender identity and genderists. Furthermore, there is the issue of surrogacy. Surrogacy refers to a practice wherein a couple rent the womb of a woman who would gestate and carry a child, which he then has to hand over to the couple upon birth. Surrogacy is done for monetary compensation or for altruistic reasons, not involving payment. The Surrogacy Bill of 2019 does not recognize trans identified people as eligible to rent a womb. Trans activists argue that trans identified people should have access to surrogacy so that they can have a child and make a family. And the surrogacy bill, not allowing the same, makes it exclusionary. However, there is no right to have a child, either under the Indian constitution or the law otherwise. The trans rights lobby ignores that surrogacy is a violation of women's bodily and physical integrity. It is because it involves inducing a woman's body to go through the physiological process of gestation to satisfy the wishes of someone else, and, and the medical procedures administered cause long term physical damage to women's bodies. In India, it is the most vulnerable and poorest of women, along the lines of caste and class, who find themselves forced to rent their homes. On the contrary to the popular suggestion that it allows women to earn a livelihood, surrogacy traps women into a vicious cycle of poverty, where they are back to the same condition of desperation once the money runs out. Yet the trans lobby defends surrogacy as a matter of rights of trans identified people. A trans identified male has cryopreserved his sperm at a fertility clinic in Gujarat and says, to become a mother, I will not be shy in seeking surrogacy options across the globe. No one, trans or non binary or homosexual, has the right to exploit women's bodily integrity. Then comes prostitution, which is often referred to as sex work in liberal circles. Many trans identified men are forced to prostitute themselves. In liberal discourse, prostitution or sex work is referred to as a primary means of livelihood for these men. But the support from the trans lobby for the abolition of prostitution in India is yet to be seen, in the sense that it is not forthcoming. Defending prostitution as work done by trans identified men has the effect that lakhs of women and girls who are also trapped in it, prostitution being an institution of male supremacy, cannot exit prostitution.